There was a real nice gathering of people at the Cresco Country Club in Cresco, Iowa for the 43rd Annual Wrestling Hall of Fame induction into the Iowa High School Wrestling Hall of Fame. Some of the previous Hall of Famers were there, along with the 1960 Cresco Spartans, who were a state champion. But the night, of course, belonged to the Hall of Famers. Bob Buzzard of Salem, Oregon, by way of East Waterloo, along with Gene Doyle of Cedar Falls, and Marv Reland, Eagle Grove wrestler, who later went on to Iowa City, and Mark Sidlinger of Charles City, also an Iowa Hawkeye wrestler. The night was emceed by Dennis Merrick of Prodovan, and first off to be inducted into the Hall of Fame was Bob Buzzard from Salem, Oregon today, but he got his start in East Waterloo as a wrestler, and he also talked about coming to Cresco as a state champion team back in the early 60s when they also teamed up and faced a state champion in Cresco. And he talks about Tom Peckham and others, and then later on his wrestling coaches who had a great influence on him.
Tom Peckham was a 127-pounder, and we came up and wrestled these guys, and they were state champs, and we were state champs down there. They were, at that time, A state champs, B state champs. I think we were a little tougher, but anyway, you guys were good. Okay, we were just a little tougher. Okay, but, I have a couple other stories I'd like to tell about Peckham, but I don't know if I should do it here tonight. He might come unglued. He's a little bigger than I am now, so there was a time I could scrap with him. And so, anyway, I did grow up in the great state of Iowa, and we were educated in the Waterloo school system, and I had some really tremendous coaches, and that's really what helped me along the way, is to have coaches that knew how to coach and knew how to work with you and knew your strengths and weaknesses and knew where you fell down a little bit and know how to get you tougher and in those weaker areas. So you got to have those guys on your side, and so anyway, I was blessed with that. And some of those guys that I'd like to mention, those coaches, first of all, I'd start with my junior high coach, Coach McCoy. And he only stayed about 3 years, and then he took off to California. And anyway, Dave Natvig, who was an awesome coach. I mean, he really got us guys good workouts, the right stuff, and knew how to work us very hard. Harold Nichols and Les Anderson, who I was his size, so he was a workout partner of mine. So he really helped me a lot. And then Terry McCann, who is deceased now, but was an Olympic champion in 1960, was my freestyle Greco-Roman coach, and Mike Rodriguez out in Michigan when I was there helped me a lot. So those guys.
That's Bob Buzzard, an East Waterloo wrestler, now in the Hall of Fame, now living in Salem, Oregon. And next up from Cedar Falls, a coach, a guy who actually did not wrestle himself, but became a great coach at Cedar Falls. Gene Doyle we're talking about, and Mr. Doyle talks about the early struggles of getting the Cedar Falls program on track.
Got better and better. And but every year we would get Bob Darrow, who's here, one of my favorites. They would come up from Des Moines, Dowling, and they would always take our Keith Young Trophy home from our first big tournament. And year after year after year he did that. So I said, I got to figure out what Coach Darrow is doing. I said, he's doing something special. They're good every year. And so I got my coaches together and we were talking. I said, we're going to do what Coach Darrow does. And Carmen said, you mean we're going to start recruiting in Des Moines?
Hall of Fame Cedar Falls coach Gene Doyle at the Wrestling Hall of Fame, and also inducted was Marv Reland, who is most recognized for his coaching and officiating throughout the years. And Mr. Reland had this to say about being told that he was a member of the Hall of Fame.
A month and a half after the state tournament, we didn't have any wrestling to talk about. So he proceeded to tell me that selection committee had selected me as one of the 2012 inductees. And it kind of just went over my head. I thought, now, I can't believe that this is happening. And he probably thought he was talking to a zombie because there really wasn't much of a response coming back. But after we were done, I went in the house, gave my wife the phone and said, "You won't believe this." And she says, "No, I don't believe this." A lot of confidence, so.
That's Marv Reeland, Hall of Famer from Iowa City, Iowa. And last and certainly not least, Mark Sindlinger, the former heavyweight champion, three-time state champion from Charles City. As a matter of fact, he joked about going last. Heavyweights always go last. He told Dick Cuvalier, a former state champion himself, a two-time from Turkey Valley. But Sindlinger, certainly an outstanding wrestler, but also an outstanding football player, earning a scholarship to play football for Hayden Fry at the University of Iowa, and also wrestled for Dan Gable at the U of I. He was also a very entertaining speaker, as he had folks laughing most of the time during his presentation.
And I see there's a different microphone. I was here a few times. I watched the Brands brothers. I assume they tore it up when they were here their years. I don't know if any of you remember that, but I do. And in 7th grade, I did spend a lot of time on my back in the wrestling room. My dad and I had lots of conversations about swimming or wrestling. But obviously
Hall of Fame wrestler, heavyweight from Charles City, Iowa, Mark Sindlinger. And we'll wrap it up right after this. As they say, the proof is in the pudding. Look at these quality jobs done by Chris Reichs and Reichs Landscape. It's landscaping like this that has allowed Chris to build a solid business in just a few short years. Why? Simple. People see the work and the word of mouth from satisfied customers. You should be the next satisfied customer of Chris Reichs and Reichs Landscape. Give them a call. Certainly a great group of men, not just wrestlers and athletes. Gene Doyle from Cedar Falls, Marv Reeland from Iowa City, Mark Sindlinger of Charles City, and Bob Buzzard from Salem, Oregon, an East Waterloo wrestler, as they are now Hall of Fame members, 104 strong, the Wrestling Hall of Fame. For WDDnews.com, I'm Randy Novotny.